Welcome to the Partisans channel. Today we explain Numbers chapter 27 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We're jumping into a really critical moment in the biblical narrative here. The Israelites are standing right on the edge of the Promised Land. The entire older generation has passed away. They finally finished their 40 years of wandering in the desert. And a new census was just taken to get the new generation ready to enter the land. So in today's explainer, we're going to take a fascinating, step-by-step look at a single, incredibly powerful chapter. It's a chapter that bridges one family's bold fight for their legacy with a nation's sudden, desperate need for a new leader. What makes Numbers chapter 27 so uniquely compelling is that it packs in two massive, totally groundbreaking milestones right next to each other. On the one hand, we've got this unprecedented legal case brought forward by 5 incredibly brave women. And then, right on the heels of that, we witness the deeply emotional handover of supreme power from Moses to his successor. So, it's a chapter all about monumental transition, moving from the old generation to the new, and solving some very real, very human problems along the way.
So here's the roadmap for our explainer today. We'll be walking through the chapter chronologically. We're going to start with the daughters of Zelophehad seeking justice, look at God's definitive ruling on their inheritance, follow Moses as his final journey begins, see him ask for a new shepherd for Israel, watch the formal passing of the torch to Joshua, and finally wrap things up with some core lessons and a quick recap.
All right, let's dive into Section 1, The Daughters Seek Justice, covering verses 1 to 5.
Right off the bat, we're introduced to a seriously bold move by a specific family from the tribe of Manasseh who are descendants of Joseph. These are the daughters of a man named Zelophehad. Let's actually name them because the biblical text goes out of its way to list every single one of them. Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. And what they do is just remarkable. They approach the entrance of the tent of meeting, the Ohel Moed, which is the holiest, most central site in the entire Israelite camp. And they stand right there before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the tribal leaders, and the entire assembly. Just take a second to realize how culturally unprecedented this was in the ancient world. You have 5 women stepping up to the national leadership in this highly public, central, and sacred forum to bring a legal case in front of the highest authorities of the nation. It really highlights just how immensely courageous they were.
The core dilemma they present is honestly so compelling. They explain that their father died out in the desert. Now, they are very careful to clarify that he wasn't part of Korah's rebellion. If you remember, Korah's rebellion was that massive uprising against Moses and God earlier in the book of Numbers, and the people involved in that lost their property and their standing entirely. Instead, these daughters specify that Zelophehad died for his own individual sin, just like the rest of that older generation did. But here's the problem. He left no male heir. In the ancient world, land inheritance was strictly passed down through sons. So without a son, Zelophehad's property and his name risked being totally erased from his clan. Facing that reality, the daughters boldly ask, "Why should our father's name disappear? Give us property among our father's relatives."
Which brings us to Section 2, God's ruling on inheritance, covering verses 6 to 11.
Now Moses is the supreme judge of Israel, right? But look at what he does here. He doesn't rely on past precedent because, well, there isn't any. And he doesn't just guess the answer or rely on his own intellect. Acting as a truly humble and impartial leader, Moses takes this unprecedented case directly before the Lord to seek a divine decision. And God's response? It is immediate and definitive. The Lord says to Moses, what Zelophehad's daughters are saying is right. God completely validates their claim. Moses is commanded to surely give them property as an inheritance among their father's relatives, allowing their father's legacy to pass directly to them.
But it doesn't stop there. This specific case actually creates a brand new, permanent law for everyone. God establishes a strict legal statute of inheritance for all Israelites going forward. It lays out a clear hierarchy. If a man dies and leaves no son, the inheritance goes to his daughter. If he doesn't have a daughter, it goes to his brothers. If no brothers, to his father's brothers. And if his father had no brothers, it goes to the nearest relative in his clan. You guys, this was absolutely revolutionary for ancient Near Eastern property law. It wasn't just some one-off loophole. God was establishing a permanent statute of justice to protect vulnerable families. The daughters of Zelophehad didn't just secure their own future, they secured a legal right for generations of women to come.
This brilliantly illustrates the pivot that happens right in the middle of this chapter. We move from preserving a single family's legacy and legal future and shift focus entirely towards securing the whole nation's future. The narrative suddenly pivots from dealing with land inheritance to the monumental transition from Moses to a new leader.
That leads us right into Section 3. Moses' final journey begins, verses 12 to 14.
Literally right after settling the inheritance law, the Lord shifts the focus entirely to Moses' own destiny. God commands Moses to go up into the Abarim Range. Now, the Abarim Range is this mountainous region east of the Jordan River, which includes Mount Nebo. From those high peaks, Moses is going to get a sweeping, panoramic view of the land God has given the Israelites. But it comes with a really heavy blow. God tells Moses that after he sees it, he will be gathered to his people, just as his brother Aaron was. Meaning, Moses is going to die without actually entering the promised land he just spent 40 long years trying to reach. The text plainly clarifies exactly why this is happening. It's because during a previous incident at the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the desert of Zin, both Moses and Aaron rebelled against God's command and failed to honor God as holy before the people's eyes. It's a stark reminder that actions have consequences, even for the greatest of prophets, and it gives this scene some profound emotional weight.
Moving on to section 4, a shepherd for Israel, looking at verses 15 to 17.
Put yourself in Moses' shoes for a second. You've just been told you are going to die right before reaching the finish line of a grueling 40-year journey. How do you react? What Moses doesn't do here is incredible. He does not complain. He doesn't plead for his own life or ask for extra time. Instead, his very first and only thought is for the people. Moses immediately prays to the Lord, addressing him with this beautiful phrase, the God of the spirits of all mankind. In the Hebrew, this phrasing is essentially an appeal to the Creator who understands the unique inner nature, the needs, and the specific temperament of every single individual. Moses is asking the God who knows everyone inside and out to pick a leader perfectly tailored to this specific flock. He asks him to appoint a new leader who will go out and come in before them, which is an idiom meaning someone to lead them in everyday life and in battle. And why? As Moses says, so that the Lord's people will not be like sheep without a shepherd. I mean, it just perfectly showcases Moses' immense selflessness and true character.
And that takes us to section 5, passing the torch, covering verses 18 to 23.
God answers that prayer, and he already has the perfect successor chosen. He tells Moses to take Joshua, the son of Nun. The text specifically describes Joshua as a man in whom is the Spirit, so he already possesses the spiritual capability, the dedication, and the wisdom needed for the heavy burden of leadership. But God doesn't just want some private, behind-closed-doors handover. He commands specific, highly public steps so the entire nation will recognize Joshua's authority without a shadow of a doubt. First, Moses has to stand Joshua before Eleazar the priest and the entire assembly. Second, Moses is to lay his hands upon Joshua, which is a physical, highly visible symbol of transferring authority, wisdom, and honor. And third, Moses must formally commission him right there, in front of everyone.
Now, there's a really crucial detail here about how leadership is actually changing. Up until now, Moses spoke directly to God, face to face. But Joshua's leadership is going to be fundamentally different. The text explains that Joshua will stand before Eleazar the priest. When Joshua needs to make major decisions for the nation, like whether to go out to battle, Eleazar will inquire of the Urim before the Lord. The Urim was the sacred tool used by the high priest, kept in his breastpiece, to seek clear, binary yes or no decisions from God. So what we're seeing is the leadership structure actively evolving. It's shifting from Moses' singular, unmatched prophetic role into a shared, balanced structure between the civil and military leader, which is Joshua, and the spiritual and religious leader, Eleazar. And Moses does exactly as God commanded, laying his hands on Joshua and visibly passing the torch.
Finally, we arrive at section 6, Lessons in Chapter Recap, where we'll synthesize everything and look at some practical takeaways.
Let's quickly synthesize everything we've just uncovered in this powerful text to lock it in. To recap the who, what, where, and why of chapter 27, first, the 5 daughters of Zelophehad boldly and publicly approached the leadership at the tent of meeting to secure their father's property rights. Second, in response to that, God validates their claim and establishes a brand new permanent inheritance law protecting vulnerable families for all of Israel. Third, God informs Moses of his impending death on the Abarim range due to his past disobedience, a fate which Moses humbly accepts. And finally, responding to Moses' incredibly selfless request for a shepherd, Joshua is publicly commissioned as the new leader to guide the Israelites into the promised land.
When you look at the plain actions in this chapter, 2 really profound life lessons jump out at us. First, from the daughters of Zelophehad, we learn that true leadership requires the fierce courage to speak up and advocate for justice, even when there is absolutely no precedent for it. They saw a wrong, and respectfully but boldly, they demanded it be made right. Second, from Moses, we learn about the absolute selflessness of leadership, the courage it takes to step aside. His immediate reaction to his own death sentence wasn't fear or panic, but a plea for his people's protection.
He shows us what it means to put the future and the well-being of the community far, far above your own personal desires, ego, or fears.
So I'm going to leave you with this question to ponder. How will you advocate for legacy and justice in your own community today? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.